So in another 50 years, what will art museums look like? Where will they be? Who will exhibit them? Who will manage them? And who will visit them? These questions all suppose that art museums have evolved and will continue to evolve or change. It's interesting to reflect that in most cases, art museums as we know them today continue to demonstrate many of the same characteristics that they did 100 or 200 years ago. It seems that after the dramatic events that brought the public museum, the Louvre, into existence in revolutionary France, change slowed down considerably. Until Frank Lloyd Wright designed the Guggenheim Museum in New York, great museums are in the main synonymous with classical buildings. In the last few decades, there's been an explosion of new museums, many exhibiting their architectural pretensions on the world stage. In some cases, they are bigger and bolder than those of the past. Stylistically, they may be modern or postmodern, but go inside, and what we visitors see and experience are cleverly configured spaces designed to display works of art.
You know, reflecting on this talk and looking back, I realised that I've actually been working in museums and galleries for 20 years now. I started in kind of around 1991, kind of at the National Portrait Gallery. So the Portrait Gallery opened in 1854, so it's one of the oldest kind of museum gallery institutions in the UK. And I just want to tell you a little bit about what that institution was like 20 years ago, because I think it provides some interesting guides to what might happen in institutions kind of in the future. So at that time, 1991, the NPG had a series of permanent and temporary exhibition spaces. It still does, so things haven't changed. The organisation cared passionately about the artists it represented, and it was predominantly focusing on the fields of painting, sculpture and photography, and it still does all those things. It was also an active exhibition organiser and lender to major exhibitions around the world, and continues to do all those things too. The curatorial departments at that time were strictly divided by periods, so there was a curator for 17th century, 18th century, 19th century and 20th century. And those curators were really driven by a scholarly research agenda rather than a desire to make work accessible to the public. Curators weren't really interested in the needs of visitors at all. In fact, their focus was on exhibitions, and they normally did one every 5 years, and writing and publishing at that point. We had an education department at the National Portrait Gallery whose sole focus was to organise workshops for schools and to produce teachers' guides. There were few adult-orientated kind of events, and those that were developed tended to be academic conferences, which were very popular with the curators, who were academics. The thought of opening a museum in the evening and allowing public to come in and look round was an absolute anathema to everybody in the institution and was never suggested. So all the press and marketing was dealt with by one press officer who organised press launches and the publications of the monthly leaflet, which was our only communications channel. There was no marketing department. Marketing didn't exist as a concept in museums at that point. And therefore there was no discussion of brand identity, audiences, advertising campaigns, and obviously digital media was sort of didn't exist at that point. In fact, the museum had no website, and it didn't actually have any computers either. In fact, our only means of kind of contemporary technology was one fax machine, which was shared by 100 people. However, the galleries always seemed busy and exhibitions were always popular. We knew people came to the institution, but we didn't actually count them because we didn't need to. So fast forward to 2011 at ACMI. So ACMI is a very different institution. We're obviously sort of focusing on the worlds of film, television and digital culture. Well, I guess we're kind of unique worldwide for that. There are a small number of venues like ACMI around the world, one in Paris, one in New York, one in Toronto, and a small number of others. But we embrace digital culture in all of our programs. But like the NPG, creative practice is at the heart of everything we do. And you know, we celebrate and contextualise the work of filmmakers, television professionals, video game designers, and artists. You know, contrary to what's suggested by our name, we don't just show moving image material, but also drawings, prints, photographs, and sculpture as well. So quite different, quite similar, in fact, to the National Portrait Gallery where we started. However, we don't have specialist curatorial departments. Our curators tend to be generalists, and that allows them to range across a range of media forms, time periods, etc., rather than being restricted by historical timeframes or subject areas. So that is a big change. Similarly, the marketing and comms areas change in a big way. Unlike the NPG, I mean, we're similar size organisations, so the NPG had about 100 staff, ACMI has about 100 permanent staff, full-time staff. We have a marketing and comms department. We develop our own brand identities, media campaigns, advertising campaigns for print, TV and web. We also have an in-house media studio, so we can script, shoot and edit digital content, and an in-house media tech where members of the public can come and kind of look at our collections in a kind of live moving image context within the building. So that's quite unique. Whilst we still organise face-to-face events through our public programmes department at ACMI, we're increasingly developing web-based projects, providing access to chat forums for teachers, for example, and monitoring those and devising bespoke digital programmes which link to the projects that are going on in the building. So the public programmes area has actually changed a lot, and it's very different from what it was 20 years ago. So let's move ahead in time. Let's move forward 50 years. Well, museums and galleries are essentially building-based institutions, and I don't think that basic concept is really going to change. I mean, people will come and visit a museum and gallery institution to see the artworks that are being presented, to engage with those artworks, and to have a social experience. And institutions like ours will continue to offer all of that going ahead into the future. They've been doing that for a couple of 100 years. They'll continue to do it in future. I think the role of the curator will change, however. I think a curator will be a multi-skilled producer, selecting works, shooting new media content, working with international colleagues and drawing on a range of voices, both in the professional and amateur domain. A new set of professional skills is going to be required to deal with the challenges of the new media forms that develop. And we'll need to offer a much broader art form outlook. I mean, I think the times where we were kind of drilled down into our media specificity and time frame are a thing of the past. We'll look at the way in which all media forms interact together. So I think the big difference for an institution like ACMI in 50 years' time is that with the digital revolution that we're currently in the midst of, our materials are changing kind of dramatically. And I was just talking to Leanne about this earlier on. I mean, currently we do a lot of animation exhibitions at ACMI. We did the Pixar exhibition. We recently looked at the Disney archive and Tim Burton and so on. Within those exhibitions, we're actually able to show quite a lot of traditional media, drawings, illustrations, photographs, models, etc. But increasingly, animation companies are working exclusively online, so there are no kind of 2 or 3D artifacts at all. And I'm actually working on an early stage project with a big studio, an animation project at the moment, where it's hard to identify what the legacy artifacts might be other than screen-based content. So I think that's quite a challenge for an institution like ACMI, because I think in 50 years' time we will be potentially developing wholly screen-based kind of exhibitions that look at certain subject matter like feature film and animation, because those forms are now only being developed in that media form. So that will be a change. You know, I think the look and feel of exhibitions is likely to be pretty similar, but the distribution of artifacts is likely to be limited by rising fuel costs, high insurance bills, huge international demand for artworks, particularly with the development of a huge cultural infrastructure in China, but with many, many more institutions that can afford to borrow artworks from other collections. I think that competitiveness will really affect what we do here in Australia, and I think it will lead to more commissioning, more sharing of costs with other institutions, and less exclusivity. So when exhibitions come to Australia, they'll no doubt have to travel around the country rather than being shown in specific countries, because it would just be too expensive to import them kind of otherwise. Curators will use the latest technology as part of their work. Wireless and cloud-based technologies will allow media to be driven from the cloud and shared in the gallery. So the days of servers, media players, etc. will be long gone. We will download our content directly from the cloud into the gallery. So a lot of infrastructure that we have currently will be just gone. Artists will use the latest technology within their work. I guess they'll be using 3D, super thin screens. We'll use miniature projectors in the gallery, but we'll also show 16mm film, 2D and 3D objects, and video material too. So, as media forms change, we'll embrace them, but continue to reflect on the forms of the past. I think the biggest changes will happen in the marketing and comms domain, as they did kind of at the National Portrait Gallery, of course. When the kind of marketing function kind of sort of developed in the mid-90s. Print media is likely to disappear, largely, as tablet-driven technologies become ubiquitous. It's unlikely that we'll be printing leaflets, posters, catalogues, or tickets. All materials will be produced online, for online consumption only, and I think that's probably a reality, rather than pure speculation on my part. With the demise of the printed press, venues will need to produce their own moving image content and motion graphics, which will be supplied directly to media channels for use. And we're actually doing quite a bit of this already, so it's not too far-fetched to think we'll be doing a lot more in the future. Art museums will need to have digital studios capable of producing their own moving image content, and staff capable of writing stories, shooting, editing, and distributing material online. We'll know a huge amount about our audiences, more than we ever have done, and we'll have much more contact via social media, allowing visitors to shape and direct the offer in a much more engaging way. Curators will have large followings and will attract their followings and audiences to the projects that they develop within institutions. Box offices will cease to exist as tickets will be purchased online. Scanners will admit visitors into the building. So, 150 years, very short time, and the Museum of 2061, 50 years is a very short time. The Museum of 2061, I don't think will look very different to the Museum of today. I don't think a huge amount will change kind of visibly. A visitor will be welcomed at the door. You'll be able to buy a coffee. You can buy a gift in the store. Come and see an exhibition. That won't change. Artists and artworks will continue to be the life and soul of our institutions, but I think it's the way that we develop displays and let people know about them that is going to be radically different in the future. So let's wait and see. Thank you very much.